So it's the end of the year, you guys, and it's that time to go over all of my 5-star reads that I had this year and also the few DNFs that I had as well. And we'll go over my thoughts and why I loved or didn't love these books. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be going over all of my 5-star reads this year, as well as the few books that I ended up DNFing, and I'm going to go over my thoughts and everything on them, about why I loved them or why I didn't necessarily like them. But I do want to preface this that any books that I did DNF that maybe I didn't personally like isn't necessarily that the books are bad. It's just that they weren't for me, they weren't for my taste, they weren't for the things that I like in a book. So they may be some of your favorite books, and in no way am I saying these books are terrible. So before we get into the video, please make sure that you check my description box below for my links to my Instagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me, my Pango Books account, and my Patreon. All is linked down below. And also make sure that you leave me comments. I want to know your thoughts on, did I love books that you loved, or did I DNF books that were your favorites? I always like to hear people's thoughts in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get into the books that I loved and the ones that I gave 5 stars to. So the first book, and this is in no particular order at all, but the first book, of course, that I gave 5 stars to is my reread of Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. I just recently finished up the cat and mouse duet for like the 5th time. I love this duet. I love the characters. I love the world. I love the mystery of who's doing this, who's targeting us type of thing. And I do like to preface that these books are extremely dark. They deal with so many heavy trigger warnings that I always tell everyone to please go check them out, because they are not for everybody. And I don't want you to dive into a book thinking that it's like a dark romance, and then you get in there and there are talks of things that maybe you personally are triggered by. So always check trigger warnings with H.D. Carlton. But I loved this book and I loved the reread of it. The atmosphere is by far the best gothic atmosphere that I have experienced in a dark romance. I really love the trauma aspect in here as well. I know that sounds weird, but I feel like all the authors, they don't typically write trauma very well, but H.D. Carlton does. Whenever Adeline goes through some things and the trauma that is after, the way that her and Zaid handle it and the talk of it and the way of being rehabilitated and coming to terms with everything was done very well. And I don't feel like it was tacky or that, you know, there was anything rushed due to the romance. I feel like it was handled very well. I really liked the characters in this, and I loved the side characters as well. But I specifically really love the morally gray character of Zaid, because Zaid is a stalker, and he stalks Addie, and he's like, I want you, and there's nothing you're going to say about it. In the first book, there is some dubious consent, so definitely be aware of that. The second book, there's a lot more trigger warnings that you really need to check on. But Zaid does some questionable things. He does some things that you wouldn't necessarily like in a male main character. What I do love, though, is even though Zaid is kind of on the gray side of the characters, he does a lot of good as well. So I mean, you know, you can take him however you want, but I absolutely love Zaid. So if you're looking for a dark romance that does have a really good gothic feel to it and very morally gray characters and, you know, something that will hook, line, and sinker you, definitely try Haunting Adeline and then the second book, which is Hunting Adeline. But please beware of the triggers. And then the next book, of course, that I gave 5 stars to, which may kind of surprise a lot of people because of what is being talked about right now on the book, but that is Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. I absolutely loved this book. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are talking about how it's a YA, but yet the characters are like 18, 19, 20 years old. You have, it just doesn't feel like a YA book, and I would agree with that. But going into this, Ali Hazelwood's writing is just so good. I absolutely love the way that she builds her characters. I love the way that she writes the stories. I absolutely love the romance in here because it isn't a insta-love type of thing, which I don't think any of Ali Hazelwood's books so far have been very insta-lovey. I feel like there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of push and pull from both of the characters. One thing that I did really like about this is Nolan is a very inexperienced guy for his age. And what I mean by that is sexually. And I know that in a lot of our books that we read, the man is always like the dominating one, the alpha, the one that just takes control. And what I really like about this is instead of it being Nolan who's in that power kind of taking control thing, it's really Mallory. And I actually loved that aspect about this book. And I really love how Ali Hazelwood writes books about things that most people don't know anything about, like chess. I know nothing about chess, but reading this book, I felt like I understood chess. I felt like I had been a part of this chess world this whole time, and I never had. So I like how she not necessarily dumbs it down for people, but she explains it in a way that makes you feel like you know a lot about this topic and you've been a part of this world this whole time. So I absolutely loved this book. I felt like it's not YA. I felt like it could have been more new adult and it would have been perfect. But nonetheless, I mean, with its, flaws that it has, I still loved it. I still gave it 5 stars. I was giddy. I was happy. I was kicking my feet. So again, I really loved it. And then we are on to one of my favorite authors, which is Olivia Wildenstein, and this is her House of Beating Wings series. It's a brand new series that she just came out with. I don't know if book 1 came out this year or last year, but I just read it this year. This is the Bookish Box edition. And I love Olivia Wildenstein. I've only read 2 series by her, The House of Beating Wings, and then the Rose Petal Graves series, which is like Rowanwood Legends series, I think. And I really love Olivia Wildenstein's writing. I love the way that she world builds and stuff because it's not dense. It's not like an epic or a high fantasy, but she gives you enough of the world building where you are immersed into this fantasy world. I loved the characters in here. I loved our main character. She is trying to free 5 Iron Crows because she thinks that means that she's going to marry her best friend, who is the prince of this kingdom. So she's on this quest, you guys, and there are funny moments where I was laughing, but then there were other moments where it really threw you for a loop. You were like, oh, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think about that plot twist. It kind of threw a lot of things at you, and the ending of this has made me want to go on to the second book so bad. I can't wait to continue this story and see where we go with it. I love the fact that there is a cast of characters along the way that you meet. It's kind of like a found family aspect, and I really love that in a lot of my fantasies, especially whenever we are going on quests and we are doing things to unravel a mystery or whatnot. Olivia Wildenstein does such a good job. This is a fae fantasy romance. This is first in the series. I think there are 3 books currently published, and the 4th and final book, I think, comes out maybe beginning of next year. I'm not quite sure, but I know that the series will be finished probably within the next 6 months, if I was to guess. So you wouldn't have to wait very long to dive right into this, but if you really like fantasy romance, but you want to maybe dip your toes into a little bit of an epic fantasy, but not be overwhelmed with like Brandon Sanderson type of epic fantasy, I would definitely give House of Beating Wings a try, because it gives you a little bit of both. It gives you that fantasy romance that you love, but it also gives you enough world building and enough side characters and stuff to make you feel like you're reading an epic fantasy. So definitely pick up House of Beating Wings by Olivia Wildenstein. And then if you are looking for maybe an epic fantasy, if you're looking for more of a dense world building and a slower moving plot and a very long series, then definitely check out the Bloodgrace series by Vila Roth. This is Blood Mercy, which is the first book in the series. There are currently seven published books, and I think the 8th and final one comes out by May, I think, of 2024. This book, you guys have heard me talk about it so much, because it is one of my favorite reads this year, one of my newfound authors that I absolutely love. And that is, this book is very politically dense. It is very slow moving. I mean, I'm on book 6 right now, Blood Union Part 2, and I will tell you that we are finally getting some turmoil between Leo and Cassia. We are finally getting to the nitty-gritty of basically what Cassie has been wanting to do this whole time. So, like I said, it is very slow moving, but if you really like that type of fantasy where it's a high epic fantasy with a lot of politics, a lot of moving parts going along, a lot of different POVs and cast of characters that you have to keep track of, and then also the writing in here is wonderful by far because it's a proper writing style. However, whenever you are reading this, I mean, you could read like 20 pages and it is just about a conversation between Leo and his uncle, or Cassia and one of the other Hesperines. I mean, there really isn't a lot of moving of the plot. There really isn't a lot of stuff. It's just a casual conversation. How are you doing? How is the day? Did you sleep well? Kind of context. So, like I said, if you like a very slow moving plot line, I would definitely pick up this series. It is very rewarding. I'm going to be very honest with you. Like I said, I'm on book 6. I'm about to pick up book 7, which is the last published book so far in this series. And I've read all of the novellas. I've read the prequel. I have read everything that there is in this world except The Ruse, which Vila Roth doesn't have available at the moment. It's like a little novella about some of the Hesperines before this takes place. So I desperately want to read that. But that's the only book that I haven't read besides the 7th and final book that's published. And the characters are so amazing. The backstory, the politics, the history. Like, Vila Roth has like a mastermind in her brain, because the amount of history that is in here that is woven throughout this story, and it's not even just Hesperine legends and history. It is people from different neighboring kingdoms and people that you meet along the way. They are from a whole different, type of country per se. And so it's so good. I love everything about this book. I love the history, the politics, the found family, the love interest, the mystery that we have going on right now. So I'm going to stop talking about it because you guys hear me talk about it all the time. But if any of that sounds interesting to you, I would say give it a shot. But just know going in, it is spicy. There is a lot of romance in here, but it is very slow moving. So if you're not willing to trudge through the really slow parts, it's not going to be a rewarding series for you. Another new author to me this year, which this book took me by surprise as well, which is Fairytale by Veronica Lancet. This is the illustrated cover edition, which I bought from her on her website, and I do believe it's available on Amazon, but I wanted my copy signed because this book, you guys, is so good. I decided to read it because Arcane Society was announcing that they were doing a special edition of this book, and I had never heard of it. So I pick it up. It's like almost an 800-page chunker, but it was so good. It gives you the gothic vibes. It gives you the fantasy romance vibes. It gives you the paranormal and horror aspects of it. There's a mystery in here. Sometimes it feels like a thriller in here. And so I definitely suggest picking this up. The world is amazing. The history is amazing. The characters are amazing. The mystery will take you on an absolute wild ride. And there is a cat that's prevalent in this story. And what I love about the illustrated edition is it has the cat down here. I don't know if you guys can see that. You guys, the cat plays kind of a big role in this book, and I can't even tell you why. But I love this. It's a standalone, so you're not starting a series. You're not having to worry about getting into an 8-book, commitment here. It is a long book, but it is very rewarding and very satisfying. I loved watching these characters grow. I loved trying to solve the mystery along with Darcy. Why did she have to come to this town? Who is her father? Who is this Caleb Hale guy? There was just a lot of different moving parts that made me keep turning the page because I was like, I need to know. Why is she having these weird dreams? Why are people targeting her? Why are people mean? Like, what is happening? And that's just how I consumed this book so quickly. And the gothic vibes in it and like a little bit of the horror feel just kind of kept me on edge a little bit, but put me in the atmosphere. So if you want a good standalone fantasy, paranormal romance with gothic and horror vibes, definitely pick up this book. And if you are looking for a very spicy fantasy romance and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, well, look no further than Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. This was another 5-star read for me this year. A complete cover buy. Had no idea what it was about and blew me away. It's a trilogy, and as of today of me filming, I do believe it is a completed trilogy. And the third and final book came out earlier in December. This book is so good. Like I said, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So sprinkle in, the girl sacrifices herself to save her father. There is a curse that needs to be broken. There is these 4 fae princes that are wrapped up in this curse. And let's talk about some fated mates. Let's talk about fae. Let's talk about a good mystery to solve. So many good things. And then also this is a why choose. It's a reverse harem book. I loved it. The second book, which is called Woven by Gold, I believe, I do have on my shelf. I'm desperate to get to, and I plan on getting to it earlier in 2024. But this book started off the series so good. It introduces you to the characters, to the world, to the mystery, to the curse, to everything that you need to know to set you up. And it also introduces you to the romance. And in this book, in the first one, there really isn't a lot of spice in here. There may be some inner monologue thoughts that could be a little spicy, but as far as actual spice, there really isn't any in the first book. I do believe that's probably going to change in the second book and definitely the third book, but this book was so good. It introduced me to a whole new author writing duo, to a whole new world. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling that I didn't even think I needed. So complete cover buy, and it was so worth it. So if you like a fae fantasy romance and you like retellings and you do like a why choose, I would highly suggest starting this series. And of course, we are on to the next book, which is by Laura Thalassa, which is Bewitched, which this is the Fabled edition that I do have, and I'm not going to get it out of the slipcase because I've already showed it in a previous video. So I wanted to include this because Laura Thalassa is amazing. This is a new series by her, which I have read the Bargainer series. I have read the Four Horsemen series by her. There is another series that I haven't read. I think it's called the Fallen World series, which I do need to pick that up. But this starts another series, which is a witchy fantasy romance. And you are following our main girl, Celine, and she has magic, and she's been trying to get into this college university type thing for the witches so she can learn more of her craft and hone it and be around people that she likes, but she has a lot of bad luck. And in order for her to get into this university type setting, they want her to go on a quest, and they want her to also do another thing. I can't remember. So she loses her memory a lot. So she has to constantly write down like post-it notes and in a journal that details what she did that day, and keep it like 5 calendars so she doesn't miss appointments that she'll forget that she set. So we don't know why our girl keeps losing her memory. We don't know why she has all of this bad luck. We don't know what her quest is going to be about, but our girl's going to take us on her ride, and whenever she does, it kicks off a series of events that has her entangled in a whole different type of mystery and thing that she needs to solve, and there are fated mates in here. There is some revelations towards the end that has me desperate for the next book to come out, so I really hope Laura Thalassa is just typing away on her computer at the moment. But again, I loved this world. I loved our girl. I loved the aspect that she constantly had to keep a calendar and post-it notes, because I was like, girl, that's me daily. So am I a witch? Do I need to find my lost memories or something? Because I think every one of us can relate to that at some point. So I really loved it. Our Celine is so amazing. And then the god that she awakens, he's wild, I'm not gonna lie, but it was such a good book. It started off a good series. I typically don't like a lot of witchy type books, but this one really has me hook, line, and sinkered, and I really like that it's not like a fae fantasy romance, that circle around by the hundreds. So if you want a good witch story, if you've never heard of Laura Thalassa and you want to dive into her writing, you can try Bewitched. I think it was a very good starter book, especially if you are not used to her writing and you're not used to her world building. It gives you kind of a taste of that. But then I highly suggest going on to the Bargainer series, because I think that you would love that if you like fae fantasy romances, and especially if you love Rhysand from A Court of Thorns and Roses. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Bewitched, and it was such a good book. I can't wait for the next one. I'm in her Facebook group called, I think, the Thalassalites, I think is what they're called. And there hasn't been any update as of today on when the second book is coming out, but you bet that I am definitely going to be scouring the internet until I find a date when I can continue this story. And the next 5-star read that I had is probably on a lot of people's 5-star reads for the year, or at least their all-time favorite series, which is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I just discovered Stephanie Garber this year. I had heard about her, the Caraval trilogy and everything, for a few years now, but I never picked it up. And then I heard people talking about this, did this come out like 2 years ago, I think? And people had been talking about it for a while. And finally I was like, I need to pick this up. But I decided that even though you don't have to read the Caraval trilogy to start this series, I wanted to start from the beginning to kind of just get adjusted to the writing style and the world building and the characters. Because I know that Jax, who is the male main character in this series, appears in Caraval, and you kind of get a lot of his backstory and who he is. So I wanted to read that, and of course Caraval wasn't a 5-star read for me, but Once Upon a Broken Heart, oh my goodness, this is very whimsical and fairy tale like and magical and enchanting, and the writing is so much better than the Caraval trilogy. I feel like the characters are amazing. Evangeline makes a lot of bad choices, but who doesn't in their life? Jax, his redemption arc is just perfection. I loved everything about this. I loved that there was a little bit of a mystery. I loved that their banter and the way that they connect between the two of them is just so spot on to a perfect romance. So if you want a fairy tale like enchanting read that's very whimsical and lyrical, I definitely suggest picking up Once Upon a Broken Heart. It had my heart. I absolutely loved everything about this series except the final book, which, if you want to know my thoughts on that, you can go read my my October wrap up or my November wrap up, because it wasn't the best, but it's fine. But definitely try this out. I don't feel like you do need to read Caraval first, but I do think that if you want the most out of this world and the most out of Jax as a character, definitely read Caraval first, because I think that it's going to set up a lot of stuff for you. And there are a lot of Easter eggs in this first book that reference Caraval, and you would miss those if you hadn't read it yet. And another 5-star read that really took me by surprise, a new author to me. I didn't even think that I liked rom-coms until I read this book, but it came in my Afterlight subscription, so I was like, well, I might as well try it before I get rid of it, and that is X's and O's by Amy Lee. Now, I think this is a series of, like, not really interconnected standalones, but, like, they're kind of in this same world, possibly. And this is, I think, the second book in the series. But it's a standalone. You can read it whenever you want. And I did. And I loved it. It's a rom-com. It is so sweet, so funny. It is spicy. I really loved it because she's a book influencer. And I was like, hey, I am trying to get my booktube up and going. I'm trying to make friends and talk just books with everybody. And she does that, and she decided to make a video where she is going to date all of her exes because she wants that second chance romance trope, just like her grandmother has. And she lives with Trevor, who is just a friend to her because she swapped apartments with her sister's fiance so they could live together. And whenever she's living with Trevor, they just become friends. He's helping her along the way. It's funny. I was laughing so hard, giggling. I had the time of my life with this. It is your standard rom-com where you're going to have funny moments. You have the third act breakup. There's a lot of different things that, are very tropey in here. But I ate it up, you guys. I ate this book up so much, and it is one of my favorites of the year. So I highly suggest anybody, if you like rom-coms, try it out. But even if you haven't ever read any rom-coms, try it out as well, because it's so fun. I found a book that is a Kindle Unlimited book, and I read it last year whenever I read 20 Kindle Unlimited books because I was trying to get rid of all of mine that were just sitting there and that I hadn't read and that I had just added all the time. And this was one of the books that I read then, and then I ended up picking it back up this year kind of as a reread because I didn't really remember a whole lot about it, and I accidentally had purchased it on Amazon as a physical copy. So I was like, let's just go ahead and give it another read. And it ended up being one of my favorites this year. And that is An Enchantment of Thorns by Helena Rookwood and Elm Vence. Now, this is another Beauty and the Beast retelling. The cover is what got me, you guys. Look how beautiful that is. I mean, you can tell that this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling without even knowing the synopsis, just from the cover. But you guys, this is a fae fantasy romance. It is so good. Our female main character, she lives in a town that is surrounded by kind of like the Folkwood, where that's where like the fae and these other creatures live. So she tries to keep her people safe. She's like a green witch type of thing, where she is a healer in the town. She keeps people from being terribly sick, and she also keeps the Folkwood at bay, where she keeps it from invading their town. And I don't know if it's every year or every so many years, there is this it's not really a contest or anything, but the prince comes and picks a lady that is going to go back with him to his kingdom, and everybody that goes there ends up dying. So, she looks at it as this is a death sentence. And her sister, I think it's her stepsister, ends up wanting to be chosen. Like, she thinks that it's going to be so glorious to be a princess, in the Fae realm and all of this stuff. So whenever the prince comes, she ends up putting herself kind of in his path. She gets chosen. She's whisked away. And there are things that she finds out about this, Fae curse about, why he's been taking wives, or at least, people to become his wife. And she finds out why people are honestly really dying. So, of course, everything is not what you think. Everything is entirely different. And our girl is on a quest to save this kingdom. I loved it. I can't wait to get to the second book. This is a finished trilogy, and it is on KU if you want to go and check it out. I loved every aspect of this, but this is the closest to a Beauty and the Beast retelling that I have ever read, because, of course, the Fae Prince, he's very broody, and, he's just like the Beast from, our Disney fairy tale. So definitely give this a shot if you absolutely love Beauty and the Beast, and if you like Fae fantasy romances. I feel like you would really enjoy this book. And then the second to last book that is on my 5-star reading list before we get into the duds, as I like to say, and that is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This, at the beginning of the year, was taking the whole internet by storm. Everybody was talking about it. The second book, Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, I think came out in April or May of this year. So I ended up reading this before the second book came out, and boy, I am so happy I did, because this world is so good. It is about a girl who was taken whenever she was a child, 7 or 8 years old, and her whole town was being demolished, and she's taken by the Nightborn King Vincent and raised as his daughter. She is learned to train and survive in this world of vampires who are bloodthirsty, and they will kill any human that they can. And so whenever she becomes, I think 18, 19, 20, something like that, she ends up entering into this tournament because she wants the goddess's favor at the end, where she can ask for one thing from the goddess, and she wants to bind basically herself to Vincent just to share power, just so she can be safe and help Vincent, keep the Nightborn Kingdom at bay. Now, what I really loved about this book was, for one, the vampires are very ruthless. They're very bloodthirsty, so they're not your sparkly vampires. And I also loved Aurea as a female main character. She definitely takes it upon herself to thrive in this vampire world. She doesn't just sit back in a palace as a princess. She goes out at night, stalks, the vampires, killing them, all of these things. And whenever she gets thrusted into this tournament, she is forced to become allies with somebody there. And of course, Rain enters. And her and Rain, he wants to be kind of allies with her. She's very reluctant, of course, because she's the only human in this tournament. And as the story progresses, she is nearly killed on multiple occasions, so that she doesn't just get away scot-free. And then also her and Rain, their banter is amazing. There is a romance in here, but there's also a betrayal that comes out at the end from, somebody that she thought she trusted. There is some revelations that come out that you didn't expect. So it definitely threw me for a loop. I absolutely adored this book. If you were thinking about picking it up, if you like a vampire paranormal romance, definitely try Serpent and the Wings of Night. And the final 5-star book that's on this list, which will be of no surprise to anybody who's been watching my videos for a while, and that is The Words by A. Jade. This is a standalone contemporary romance, and it is a rock star romance, but it is so good. It deals with Phoenix and Lennon whenever they're in high school. Phoenix is struggling, so Lennon ends up tutoring him. They become friends. She helps him, graduate basically. And then Phoenix turns around, and instead of saying thank you, he betrays Lennon in a very hurtful way. And so their friendship is severed. She hates him, all of these things. And then we fast forward 5 years later. Phoenix is a rising rock star. Something tragic has happened in his band that has made him spiral into drugs and alcohol. So his PR team is wanting to hire somebody who is going to keep him on the straight and narrow to get through this tour that they have going on. And every person that they hire ends up sleeping with him, so they end up getting fired. So they're racking their head trying to figure out who they're going to bring on to keep Phoenix in line. And of course, Memphis, who is one of the band buddies, knows who Lennon is and was there whenever they were friends. So he says, you need to hire Lennon if you want to keep Phoenix in check. So in comes Lennon. She has dropped out of college. She is back taking care of her father, who is not doing well health-wise. And she is approached about, becoming kind of this caretaker of Phoenix, and all she wants is revenge. She wants revenge on him so bad, so she accepts. She is going to be stuck with him for, I think, 6 weeks, and she is going to do nothing but ruin his career. She is very revenge thirsty, and so whenever Phoenix and Lennon are thrusted into each other's lives again, things get wild. Things come out. Truths happen, and I just loved everything about this. It was raw. It was gritty. It was heartfelt. It was so amazing. Like, it just literally tore every ounce of my heart apart and then put it back together again. I absolutely loved it. I loved that it was a standalone, so I didn't have to read more books to finish this story. But what I do love is that A. Jade ended up coming out with a duology. It was kind of a spin-off from two characters that are in this book who I'm not going to say who they are because that would give away some things in this book. But it was called The Choice, and then The Consequence will be wrapping up, I think, sometime early next year. Can't wait for that. I have it on pre-order. But if you are looking for a rock star romance, if you are looking for a good story that deals with a lot of raw and gritty emotions, it deals with real life things, definitely check trigger warnings, but I would definitely highly suggest The Words by A. Jade. So those were all of my 5-star reads for the year. I had a couple 5-star reads that I didn't talk about in this video because they were continuations, like, a lot of the Blood Gray series by Vila Roth, the other books in the Serpent and the Wings of Night series. There was just a lot of them that I just didn't want to put on here, so I just put kind of like first in the series type of books. But let's get into my DNFs that I had this year, which DNFs are not a bad thing. Like, it doesn't mean that you hate the book or that you don't recommend the book to anybody. It just means that it was not a book for you. It wasn't something that interested you. And it's okay to say, you know what, I'm kind of done. I'm not going to continue. This is kind of boring for me. So let's get into, I don't think I have very many, to be honest with you, but I also don't own any of these books, so I will put them up here for you. The first one is going to be a classic, and that is the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. I tried to read this because I really love Greek mythology. I really love history. I love a lot of things, but I just couldn't stay in the whole story with this, and that's okay. I mean, I did read pretty much all of the Iliad, but I couldn't continue with the Odyssey. It was okay. It was definitely a different writing style. I mean, this was, written like thousands of years ago. I mean, okay, I think it was like, 1800 years ago? I don't know. It was still a long time. I do know that. So I ended up, DNFing that book. And of course, that's okay because it really wasn't one of my most anticipated reads. It was a classic. I was like, I just really want to read it. It really intrigued me and I did not like it. The next DNF that I had was The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I was so disappointed. If you guys watched my wrap-up earlier this year in June, you would have heard how I was so disappointed that I did not like this book. And, a lot of people love it. There were special editions that were coming out. It was, you know, just hyped up so much, but I just couldn't get into the writing. I couldn't get into the story at all. The female main character was making me so angry because for someone who is sheltered in this world and has never really experienced anything, she seemed to know like every single thing about this. Like whenever they would be talking, to me like, oh, you know, because of blah, 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 or because we need to do this. And I'm like, but you were sheltered. How do you know all of this stuff? It was just way too convenient to me. And so I just kind of fell out of it. The next one is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. And again, in July was disappointed with this book because I had bought it. It was a cover buy, I'm not going to lie. But I also loved the synopsis of it because you have like the Goblin King. You have, you know, this girl who's wanting to save her sister. And so I was like, you know, this is going to be a really good book. And it was a duology. I think Shadow Song was the second book. I was so disappointed. Like the writing in here was just not it for me. I did not like the writing style. I ended up being just fully out of the story entirely. And I couldn't stay in it. And I don't know if it was the writing. I don't know if it was the way that the story was written. I don't know. Just this book, I did not like at all. So leave me some comments below if you ended up liking Winter Song. Did I miss something about it, or is it written in a way that obviously I don't like? I just want to hear your thoughts on that. And the final book that I did DNF, it is the most recent DNF, and that is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. This, again, was another disappointment, which I haven't done my wrap-up for this month, so I haven't went in depth with my thoughts. However, I know a lot of people really love this book. I know Sunbringer just came out, and I think was announced by Illumicrate of a special edition to kind of pair with God Killer that they did. I did not like this book. I think I DNF'd it in like the 12th chapter or something. I kept reading it. I even tried to do the audio and reading along. I tried to do everything I could. This story was just not for me. I couldn't stay in it. I didn't care about the characters. I really didn't like the writing style. There was a lot of things that I just did not like about this book. So I just ended up putting it down. I was like, you know, it's December. I'm not going to trudge through something that I'm not having a good time with. So I just ended up DNFing it. So I feel sad about it, but, you know, I have found a lot of other favorites this year, and I probably wouldn't have if I would have continued to persevere through some of these DNFs. So those are all of my books this year that I have loved and given 5 stars, or the books that I haven't necessarily liked for one reason or another. Again, those books, it's not that they're terrible. It's not that I don't recommend them to anybody. I just feel like those books are for specific readers, people that enjoy that type of setting or that type of writing, and that just wasn't me. So definitely leave me some comments below. Let me know your thoughts on this video. Do you agree or not agree with any of my ratings in here? Also check my description box below. But until next time, everybody, I hope you had a great Christmas, or actually have a great Christmas, because this is coming out on Saturday. Or I hope that you find some favorite reads, or you get a lot of books that you really loved for Christmas. And I will see you all next time. Bye!